In this breakdown, we're cutting right through the fog of war. We're going to conduct a pure open source intelligence analysis of the first 100 hours of the hypothetical 2026 Iran conflict, piecing together what happened using only verifiable public data and observable signals.
But before we get into the missiles and the jets, let's start with the one question that really frames this entire event. What happens when a war's most decisive blow isn't kinetic at all, but financial?
You see, to really understand the military operation, you have to trace the economic breakdown that made the whole thing possible. The real catalyst for this conflict wasn't some border dispute. It was a carefully engineered financial crisis designed to paralyze the Iranian state from the inside out. So here's how it went down, based on open source reporting. It all kicked off with an engineered shortage of US dollars, which quickly led to a major Iranian bank becoming insolvent in late 2025. Now, to handle the crisis, the central bank did the one thing that all but guarantees hyperinflation. It just printed more money. And the result? It was absolutely catastrophic. The rial collapsed, hitting $1.5 million to a single US dollar, which effectively vaporized the savings of the middle class and, as you'd expect, triggered massive nationwide uprisings. And this right here is the critical link between the economic and the military vulnerability. With its internal security forces, we're talking the Basaj militia and the IRGC, spread incredibly thin and trying to contain dissent at home, the regime's ability to actually mount a national defense was seriously compromised. This internal chaos created the perfect window for an external strike. And that window of opportunity, well, it was exploited with just incredible speed. This was not a slow burn escalation. The opening phase, what's been called the 100-hour decapitation, was all about velocity. It was designed to completely overwhelm a command structure that was already in disarray. That first week just unfolded at a blistering pace. On February 28th, the operation begins, and with it, confirmation of Supreme Leader Khamenei's death, a decapitation of the regime's very core. By March 2nd, air dominance is achieved. March 3rd, the conflict pivots to the sea and the Strait of Hormuz is shut down. By the 5th, the air campaign is already entering a new phase, and by the 6th, major Iranian air bases are being systematically dismantled. Now, the price tag for that kind of speed was staggering. The estimated cost for munitions in just the first 100 hours was $3.7 billion. And this wasn't just random spending. It was a clear strategy of overwhelming force, concentrating the most advanced firepower to try and land a knockout blow in the very first round. And on this slide, you can really see the strategic pivot in the air campaign. Phase 1 used expensive, long-range standoff cruise missiles, the kind you use to take out intact air defenses from a safe distance. But as soon as air dominance was achieved, the whole campaign shifted to Phase 2. They started using far cheaper GPS-guided bombs called JDAMs. This meant they could conduct a much higher volume of strikes on thousands of targets, systematically taking apart infrastructure without burning through their most expensive weapons. And we can see the direct results of this thanks to open-source satellite imagery analysis. This battle damage assessment, or BDA, from Mehrabad Airport is a perfect clinical example. It confirms at least 17 aircraft were hit, including crucial heavy-lift transports and combat jets. They were neutralized right there on the tarmac before they ever had a chance to get airborne. Of course, these military strikes on land had immediate and massive economic consequences at sea. Within just a few days, the conflict sent shockwaves across the globe as the world's single most critical energy choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, was effectively sealed off. And to put this in perspective, the closure of the strait trapped 20 million barrels of oil per day inside the Persian Gulf. That's about a fifth of the entire planet's daily consumption, with absolutely no way to get to market. The market's reaction was, as you'd guess, immediate and severe. By March 9th, oil prices had surged to $119 a barrel. This wasn't just a temporary spike either. This was global markets pricing in the risk of a long, devastating supply shock with no clear end in sight. So, facing this overwhelming conventional force, Iran's response has been asymmetric. Signals from their command indicate a strategy of using cheap, low-cost drones to go after the high-value energy infrastructure of their Gulf neighbors. The whole point is to turn the region's greatest assets, its oil and gas facilities, into strategic liabilities. But here's the thing. While the entire world was focused on oil, maybe the single most important strategic signal of the whole conflict was emerging somewhere else. A totally new kind of vulnerability was being exposed, one that doesn't target an economy, but life itself.
On March 8th, one single event completely shifted the strategic landscape. An Iranian drone struck a desalination plant in Bahrain. Now, this was a proof of concept attack that demonstrated a profound, and until now, mostly theoretical vulnerability for the entire Arabian Peninsula.
And if you want to understand the strategic thinking behind that drone strike, just look at this chart. Key nations in the Gulf are critically dependent on just a handful of centralized desalination plants for their fresh water. I mean, we are talking 90% of Kuwait's water, 86% of Oman's, and 70% of Saudi Arabia's. These plants are the literal lifelines for millions and millions of people.
So the crucial point here is this. For these nations, the physical destruction of their water infrastructure is a far greater existential threat than the economic pain of volatile oil prices. You can survive an energy crisis. You absolutely cannot survive a water crisis.
Okay, finally, let's look at the political endgame that began to emerge in that first week. The decapitation of the old leadership didn't create a power vacuum. Instead, what we saw was a rapid and pretty decisive consolidation of power. The elevation of Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the late supreme leader, signals a truly historic shift. This isn't just a continuation of the old system. What this represents is the final transition away from a complex clerical government to a much more streamlined military dictatorship, where power is fully consolidated within the hardline Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
But, and this is a huge but, this new regime is facing a profound crisis of legitimacy. We can see this signal clearly in the protest slogans now being chanted from rooftops across Tehran. The phrase, "Death to Mojtaba," shows that the public doesn't see this as a legitimate succession at all, but as a hostile takeover by a radical military junta.
Which leaves us with one final big question. The first week of this conflict has revealed a battlefield that is simultaneously economic, kinetic, and now hydrostrategic. As we see the primary targets shift from military bases to oil fields and now to water plants, we really have to ask ourselves, what does this tell us about the true nature of conflict in the 21st century?